The cow has been making headlines since a while now. Our cover story this week looks at the people who depend on the cattle and the impact that the Gau Rakshak dals have had on these people. We have with us today Pragya Singh, who conducted the investigation for our cover story, to talk about how she uncovered this nexus. Hi Pragya, welcome to Outlook Filter.
Hi.
Let's start with what made you set on this trail and how did you go about the research you did for this story?
Okay, so we started with the hunch that once the Gau Rakshaks are moving around in the countryside and attacking people, ferrying cattle, there would be a strong reason why. So the first thing we did is go to Yamunanagar in Haryana and meet a few Gau Rakshaks. And they themselves confirmed to us that they intended to have an economic impact on the people they attacked. They had a blueprint in mind, they had calculations in order, and they were moving to that plan. Secondary to that plan was the fact that they had a plan for what to do with the cattle that they rescued. And one element that they also confirmed was that they didn't want to just rescue cows but also buffaloes, goats, sheep, even chicken. Next step, we decided to go to UP, from where the victims of the Yamunanagar Gau Rakshak Dal came. These were people who were attacked and beaten, and also one of them who was allegedly killed by a Gau Rakshak Dal worker during ferrying cattle. So it was just an obvious step from there to recognize that everybody who depends on cattle in any form, cows or buffaloes, down the line from the trader would also be affected.
Right, so the incident in Una, which was covered by all media organizations, also took place while you were researching for this story. What sort of an effect did this have on your research as well as the places that you were researching at?
Obviously, it confirmed in our minds the suspicion that certain communities were being targeted, and those communities, when we spoke to people around, they confirmed also that yes, certain jobs related to cattle are only done by Dalits or largely by Dalits, and that no one else is willing to do those tasks which are considered impure and dirty, and also they're very difficult tasks. So it was not very hard from there to find the tanneries where Dalits worked in very miserable conditions, and who said that their conditions are ignored, but the cow and the cow worshippers, so-called cow worshippers, were beginning to hit their trade, hit their livelihood.
Right. Okay, so we've spoken about Dalits and how it's affected them. What are the other major communities that have been affected by this, and how has this had an economic toll on all of them as well?
Everyone is affected. Everyone who has anything to do with cattle is affected, but also the end consumers. So it's an entire ecosystem where the cattle is ferried from the farms by largely Muslim traders in northern India and taken to butchers, taken to other farms, taken to dairy farmers in Gujarat, in Punjab, in Haryana, in UP. So the network of cattle farming combined with the offal that is produced in slaughterhouses is a very big economy. You make glue, you make resin, you make shoes, you also import and export raw leather for making other items. So the economy, as we kept looking at it, kept growing. It includes cosmetics, it includes paints. That doesn't mean that all paints and cosmetics and other items use cattle products, but many of them would be doing this from time to time. And resin in particular is an industry where we learned that cattle byproducts are very often used. Soap is another, detergent is another, and usually this happens because it keeps the costs of production low. That doesn't mean that cow is being used, often it's the buffalo. But the Gau Rakshak Dals, the way they look at it is that they stop a truck, whether it carries cows or buffaloes or sometimes smaller animal, they stop it and they take it away from you. If it's a cow, they do it in the name of preventing slaughter, and if it is a buffalo, then they do it in the name of ferrying animals with cruelty. So the story also raises questions about what is cruelty and who defines it, and these are questions which obviously need to be answered.
Tell us a little about how this whole Gau Rakshak ecosystem works.
Yeah, sure. So, photographer Tribhuvan Tiwari and I went to look at how the Gau Rakshak Dals operate on the ground, and we visited a camp that they set up in Haryana near Panipat, where the leader of the gang has at least 50 to 60 boys on call, and they finish their dinners early at around 8 or 9, and then they step out into the field with weapons including guns, sticks, rods, these farming implements, and they first took us to the toll road where they stopped vehicles passing by, and they would clamber up on trucks. They would sniff the trucks because they believe they can smell Gau Mata. These are their words. And they also stop trucks on the side to inspect them should they suspect anybody. They have either a cozy relationship with the police in that area, or the police keeps quiet when they identify themselves as Gau Rakshak Dal members. They're quite bold. From there, they decided to go to a road from Haryana which leads to Kairana, which is a Muslim dominated area that the Gau Rakshak Dal members kept referring to as mini Pakistan. Right. So they went and stood on the road that day, but they had no luck in finding a truck, so they moved to the other side, deeper into Haryana, and they tried to find a truck carrying cows over there. So the bizarre thing is that at one point there were about 20 men standing on the road, and we were hiding in the shadows, waiting to see what would happen. And a truck which was carrying something completely innocuous, building material, just stopped because he saw these boys, and he was afraid to move on. And it took a lot of effort by the Gau Rakshak Dal guys to make him move, because he thought he's probably going to lose his life today. He had these big burly men waiting on the side of the road. It's a frightening experience. And Azad Arya, the head of the Gau Rakshak Dal, calls his boys children. He refers to them as boys, children, bache. They're all grown-ups though. Most of them that we spoke to that night were not educated much. They had seen very little of the world other than different Gau Rakshak Dals and different outfits of a similar nature. From the age of 10, 12, 14, 15, once they drop out of school, this is what they had done. And the cattle that they rescue usually ends up in a gaushala. There are some gaushalas which have thousands of cattle, and it's not very transparent what happens once the cattle goes there. One doesn't really know, but the talk around the cattle is that it's holy, that it's their mother, and some of them are trying to develop a business model around Gau Mutra and Gau Gobar, but they also confirm to us that it's impossible to make the Desi cow, the indigenous breeds, a viable economic alternative. You can only make it viable if you create a market for its urine and dung.
Okay, so talking about the economics of it all, of the people who are affected, how are the dairy farmers affected and the other industries as well?
Okay, so the cow economy depends on the farmer who rears cattle. Around half of Indian farmers rear cattle in some form, a buffalo or a cow. And the guys who buy it from them are the traders who often collect the, the cattle and take it to a mandi. Now, the dairy farmers of Punjab are, the best example of their victims, because it's a simple fact for them that if you have a dairy farm with 100 cows in it, and 80 of them are female and 20 of them are pregnant, it means that within the next 4 or 5 months, you will be filled to overcapacity. Yeah. The farmer, the dairy farmer, will need to get rid of some of those cows, and since those cows are very hybrid Jersey varieties, he usually gets a very good price for them. Dairy farming doesn't mean just selling milk, it also means selling cows and buying cows and replacing your old stock with new stock. So this is something that the Gau Rakshak Dals apparently don't understand. But what they do is that they catch hold of Jersey cows, they catch hold of buffaloes, they catch hold of desi varieties, any cow on the road, and the dairy farmers told me that they drag them away and put them in gaushalas where they are not really cared for. So the inability of the dairy farmer to sell a cow means that he has two choices. He can keep that cow in his farm, on his farm, and feed it very expensive cattle feed, 300 rupees a day for a good Jersey breed, or he can just let it loose on the streets. Many have chosen to do that, to let it loose on the streets, where they cause accidents, they cause a certain amount of social unrest over because a lot of Hindus revere the cow, and instead of helping, they are harming the cow in this process. The other people who are affected by dairy farming is one aspect. The other aspect is the leather tanners. If your cattle is not moving, then your tanneries are not going to get a supply of leather. And if the leather supply falls, then the piece worker, the leather worker, gets 100 rupees per skin. So if that doesn't come to him, then he's not going to be able to prepare the leather, and he is not going to be able to send it to make a shoe or a bag. So what's happening is that the cow prices are falling, but leather prices are rising. And what has saved, if you can call it saving, what has saved the industry is the fact that there is a slump. And that slump has been there for 2 or 3 years, perhaps longer. So the industry experts do say that if demand had been ordinary or rising normally, then we would have had a very severe shortfall. We don't have a shortfall of leather because there's a slump. But that doesn't change the fact that the livelihoods of people who depended on pulling leather off the dead animal, pulling the skin of the dead animal, and ferrying it to the tanneries, from the tanneries taking it to the finishing, all that has been affected.
Thank you for joining us in Outlook Filter, Pragya.
Thank you.
This is Arushi Bedi and you're listening to Outlook Filter.